Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome everybody to this meeting of the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny. This is the first meeting we've had for a while. We've had no change in attendees or technology, so let's hope things go smoothly tonight. Firstly, a few housekeeping things. Please note that this meeting of the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcasting and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everybody present follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to by the chair. Always turn on your video function when invited to speak. State your name before you speak if you have not been introduced by name. Some people may be phoning in. And mute your microphone when you're not talking. And please remember to turn them back on again when you want to. After the committee has heard from presenting officers, the chair will ask committee members who wish to speak. And to do this, could you utilise the raise hand function at the top of the Teams window in the bar. The messaging bar should not be used unless you are raising a point of order or providing wording for an amendment. If at any point you'd like to speak again, please raise your hand again. The chair will ask a member in turn how they want to vote, if we need to vote. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum as far as possible, and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to the silence for the duration of the meeting. Thank you. Apologies. Do we have any apologies, Joe?
Thank you, Chair. There are no apologies for absence this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. In that case, substitute members, we can go straight past that one. Declaration of interests. Do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interests or any local interests for any items on the agenda? No, in that case, I'll assume that is not. So please do feel free to highlight that and any items if you remember when we get to them. So the minutes and action sheets. Now I have a couple of things for the action sheet. Beverley very kindly got in touch with me recently to remind us that we have a couple of items. Share the local government peer review with committee members and children carrying knives reports. That was on the action sheet that I don't believe we yet had. Can I just ask, has anybody got any information on that at all? No, well, I did send out some requests earlier, so hopefully those will follow to us quite soon. Does anybody else have any issues with either the minutes or the action sheet? No, in that case, we'll take those as read and move on. Public issues. I don't believe there's any public questions today. I'll just double check, Joe.
Thanks, Chair. That's correct. There are no public issues for this meeting. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. In that case, we will move on to item 6. COVID-19 impact and recovery, mental health and impacts of returning to schools. So this report was asked for by this committee so we could have an overview of the current state and what's been put into place. It's a very fluid situation and things have again changed since we asked for the report and are changing all the time. My personal focus on this is going to be what we've learned and ensure that we can use this knowledge when we move forward. We've got 2 parts to this. I believe Neil Goddard is going to be introducing the parts for the officers, and then we have the members of the Youth Parliament who've also got a report to present. What I intend to do is get Neil to do his bit first, then the members of the Youth Parliament to do theirs, and then we'll do questions first of Neil and then the Youth Parliament to follow. So is Neil, are you there?
Yeah, good evening, Chair, good evening, members. I'm happy to do a brief introduction for this paper. As the Chair mentioned, this was a paper that was requested by this committee to provide an overview of the work that's been done across the service in support of children return to school through the COVID process. And as I said at the start, this obviously relates to the first sets of lockdown rather than the current one, which isn't to say the actions aren't relevant and continue as we move forward. But this is obviously reporting back on the work that was undertaken during that time and the advice and guidance that was given. As you'll see in the report, the local authority produced supporting information for parents and educational settings in return to what support might be provided for children during this time. Hopefully that was helpful and it was well received. There was an awful lot of information. I know you've received lots of that through the report, and I'm not going to go through it in detail, but we're obviously happy to talk about any element of that that you'd like to pick. The second element is about a survey that was undertaken, particularly in relation to children with SEND, and the feedback that we received from that. And you'll see in the report there are some details of the feedback, and some of it will not be so surprising, I don't think, in terms of feelings of anxiety and isolation, and the impact of a lack of structure has on a child's well-being, particularly a child with SEND, I imagine. But for those of us who are working with homeschooling at the moment, I think we can identify with those issues. There was some feedback that, certainly in relation to some SEND children, there was a positive impact of being at home, feeling safe, and those elements that go around that. But the majority was that there was a negative impact overall for COVID, and that the support that was being provided was needed to help children through that time. So what you've got is a summary of that. The more detailed report from the feedback is available as well. And then the actions that were taken in relation to that, which are very much around having a plan as to how support is given, creating structure where it's possible to do so, and most importantly, understanding the experience that the child is having as a result of the restrictions that come with COVID and with the lockdown and with not attending school. And a great deal of work was done between the local authority with schools to ensure that the remote learning offer was appropriate to meet children's needs, and also obviously continue with the education offer, and that was able to be delivered through the home. Now that will be very different experiences for different families who are managing that, and the support that is there is set out in the detailed papers that go with that. I think we've learned a lot as we've gone along. I think this lockdown is a different experience to the first two, and I think certainly the remote learning offer has come a very long way in terms of how that's delivered and what that looks like from a child's perspective. Overall, though, we do need to continue to be aware of the impact on well-being of COVID, of the lockdown, and of not being in school. And as we return, hopefully, to a return to school towards Easter or maybe just afterwards, those impacts will continue, and the support will be needed within school to help children transition back into school and pick up the learning that they've missed, or the social experiences that they've missed from being in an education setting. So like I say, that's just an introduction. There's an awful lot of information within the report that obviously we can pick up should members have questions. And Chair, if you'd like to hand over to the members of the Youth Parliament, I'd be happy for you to do so.
Thank you very much, Neil. So members of the Youth Parliament, who's going to present or who's going to start the presenting of your report?
It'll be me. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. So I'm a Deputy Member of Youth Parliament. My name's Adea Brandon, and I'm joined in this meeting by Nathan, Sarah and Georgia, who are also members. And we would first like to thank you guys for giving us this invaluable opportunity and all your avidity towards including young people in overview and scrutiny. So our mission is to be advocates for young people in BCP. So to achieve this aim, during November, we conducted research into young people's response to COVID-19 in BCP. And we did this to ensure that our feedback was accurate and representative through the use of questionnaires sent out to youth groups and polls on our Instagram that can be seen through our report. And the overarching consensus that we got from these reports was that many young people reported feeling anxious, stressed and uncertain due to the changes that coronavirus has put onto them. However, since our report was made in November, there has been lots of changes since then to, national lockdown, changes to exams. So Nathan, another member of Youth Parliament, did some research into this and I'll report back to you guys. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Nathan Collins and I'm the Member of Youth Parliament for this area. So like Adea said, since we wrote that report, the situation has changed again for young people, just showing how unpredictable and uncertain this time is. Many of young people's concerns have either been answered or solved by the closure of schools and the cancellation of exams. Yet we wanted to ask students how these changes have affected their mental health from our Instagram page. Despite the decision around exams, half of students who applied said they were more stressed now that due to the uncertainty of the cancellation. In addition, more than half said that they felt their online learning experience was not satisfactory and were worried that this could affect their learning. Meanwhile, extracurricular activities that define young people's personalities have been gone for over a year. We would like to stress that even when students return to school, this time will have a lasting impact. Plans need to be put in place to support the most vulnerable transition back into the classroom environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So can I just check that has concluded your report, members of Youth Parliament?
Yes, thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Members, over to you for questions. If you could, so I was going to start with questions for Neil, but really in any order, but if you could make it clear who you want to ask the questions of. Mark Saxby, Mark, you were first to raise your hand.
Okay, Neil, how are we monitoring consistency in terms of provision for mental health and well-being? What sort of data can you get from schools? What information are you monitoring so that best practice is being shared? Contact with parents. What information are schools giving you so that we know the level of provision that's out there?
Okay, thank you for the question. So I think a number of elements to that, and that starts with our monitoring of the remote learning offer and sharing of best practice, which through the school improvement team we've been doing throughout all periods of the lockdown. But obviously, I think, as I said before, our offer has evolved over time and is now more consistent and more targeted at the needs, hopefully, of families. That's not to say there's a consistency across all schools, but that the remote learning offer should be available through, is available through schools, and our teams monitor and manage the quality assurance of that with schools to make sure that is meeting the needs as best we can. In terms of the mental health support, that is obviously what the report was going through, lots of the advice and guidance that's been given. More specifically, we track vulnerable children at an individual child level, and we work with schools to ensure that those children are being seen, that are getting the support that they need. But as you can imagine, that's a huge number of children, and so it's very much a partnership with schools. So between the schools and the children's services, there is an identification of those children who might need particular support or help, and an assurance that they are being seen, that they do have the opportunity to speak to somebody if they need to. I think what we're doing now and what we're developing is more of a support for families as a whole about how to manage the impact of COVID that the Youth Parliament members set out so well, and hopefully set out in the report, with the support that's available. It is a real challenge, and we shouldn't shy away from that. We have 57,000 pupils, or whatever the number is, a huge number of pupils, and we have to target our resources as best we can. But I think that it's the partnership with schools that is making the biggest difference, and our partnership with health services as well, who are trying to be as responsive as they can where issues should escalate and should there be a particular concern. So all of our services are focused on that, but the support that we're giving hopefully is set out in the report, and the advice and guidance is there. But like I say, the key aspect is a partnership with schools, health and others, to make sure that that's a rounded level support, and with a focus on, as I say, the vulnerable children, and tracking at an individual child level on a daily and weekly basis.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Do you want to follow up with that question, or are you happy with that?
No, that's clear. It's about that consistency of provision, and that we're getting feedback from those schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Beverley, I believe your hand was up next.
Thank you, Chairman. I realise that in hindsight, we're expected to be sat here and the children were back at school and we were looking back at all the things we'd done. So we're in a very difficult situation. A lot of the documentation before us is I guess is just reminding people about transitional information, because there are some elements of that. But the items that were COVID specific, Appendix 2 and 3, I thought were really good, and I really liked page 98, the coming back to school for the parents about what the children might experience. So I think that was really useful information. My question, I've got a couple of questions. The first one, I guess, is that when they did go back to school and they've come out again, did we have any time to assess whether the usefulness of this information, where some of the information that was provided, particularly around COVID, what value it had, and how we were able to monitor that? I don't know if they were at school long enough for us to actually assess the effectiveness of information. So that was my first question. And then my second question is, because it was about what consideration we'd given in terms of protected characteristics. So, for example, we know minorities are carrying a higher risk. So it was really, what was our awareness of that, and any particular feedback on that, really. So sort of, were we able to monitor anything on the students that did go back, and can we adjust that learning for when they go back at some point in the future? And any special considerations around, I guess, race and religion? And if I could just take the opportunity to say, I thought the Youth Parliament document, Chairman, was really good, because it honed on some specific things that needed attention. Thank you.
Thank you. In relation to your first point, as you may know, certainly after Christmas, I think some of the primary schools were back for one day, and so the opportunity to get feedback through that route was somewhat limited. There was obviously some time before Christmas where there was more children in school as well. I think the survey that we undertook was an attempt to get feedback on the effectiveness of what was being offered, and I think that's something we will want to repeat in order to get further feedback, because, as you say, the situation is so fluid and changing so rapidly. And certainly in the first 2 weeks of term, there are announcements being made every day about examinations changing, or how long the lockdown may last, and those sorts of things, that schools are having to adapt really quickly. And I have to say, did so really well, with a great deal of patience, I think, with a great deal of uncertainty, and us coming to them on a, having said, forget what we said yesterday, we're now going to do something different because the rules have changed. So I think it is really important that we get feedback. And like I said, the survey was an attempt. I think we need to go back to that and look at how we do that again this term. But this time, I have to say, there simply hasn't been time because of the rapidly changing nature of what's going forward. We do take the opportunity to get feedback where we can, and we obviously get feedback through schools, who we're in contact with every day, I have to say, about the impact and the feedback they're getting. And some schools are particularly good at giving us that feedback. And you may remember at the last meeting of the committee, Helen Frampton, the head of Somerford Primary, attended to speak, and she would say is one of those schools that is absolutely, we're getting feedback about what the impact on the families is. In relation to your other question about protected characteristics, that's always a consideration, and certainly, where there are perceived or real differentials in the transmission rate and those sorts of things, with health colleagues, we're trying to provide reassurance about that. There's some reassurance going on around the vaccination programme and those sorts of things. In relation to this report specifically about the mental health of children, I think we would always bear that in mind, but actually I think it's a more broad-based issue that we're dealing with. I think all children from any background could be in a position where they're finding this particularly hard and impacting on their mental health. So whilst I think we have to have it in our minds, and certainly in some, like I say, areas of the health elements of what we're doing and within the community support that we're doing, I think specifically in relation to the mental health, like I say, I think it is much more broad-based than that, and actually, any child could be struggling, and we need to be open to supporting them as best we can.
Chairman, could I completely accept I'd agree with what's been said. May I sort of recommend that we perhaps acknowledge that somewhere, because I think it's important for us to show in our equalities that we do recognise that perhaps their challenges and their risks are higher, and that may have a different effect with different mental challenges. So I don't doubt that we are acknowledging that, but I think maybe it would be useful to demonstrate it.
I think that would be very useful, Beverley, and recognise the fact that that children are very different and they're having different experiences. So it is our minorities and other subgroups within our children. And I think definitely in the minutes of this meeting it should be recorded. I do think we should acknowledge it. Yes. Any other questions, Beverley? Are you happy with that?
No, Chairman, I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Very much. Nathan, I believe your hand was up next. Nathan.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd just like to say, whilst the members of Youth Parliament were looking through the agenda, we really liked the documents that were given out for parents and carers to help with their lockdown learning. We were just wondering that we think that that'd be a great document for young people to have for themselves to aid with their learning. And we were wondering if there was any opportunity that a resource like that could be made.
Yeah, thank you for the feedback. That's really helpful. The document's been made available to schools to use as they think is appropriate, and made available more widely than that, I have to say. And so, if it would be helpful to share them, that would be fine. But also, if a revised or more targeted version for pupils would be helpful, I'm sure the Education Psychology Service would be happy to do that as well. But they're absolutely open to be shared as widely as is helpful. But the target audience, as you say, was parents in the first instance. But it's really helpful to get your feedback that you think pupils might find that useful as well, and be happy to try and support that and provide what information we can.
Thank you. If I could just sort of follow up on that and a couple of things that's just been said before we go on to Jane, you got your hand next. Has there been any sort of surveying to check that this, because there's a load of information being put out there. The document was huge. It took ages to read through. And any surveying to check that this information actually gets to the target audience?
Yeah, so the Education Psychology Service have supported this documentation in going out through schools. And advised and supported them in distributing it as widely as we can. I think it says in the report, you know, we really wanted this to be as widely available as it could be, but equally not to, as you say, Chair, it's a very long document, not overwhelm people with huge amounts of information that was not helpful. So we've tried to target it as best we can without restricting its circulation. Like I say, the Education Psychology Service have supported that, but absolutely the Family Information Service that you'll be aware of, who support families in the community, they're aware of the documentation, have made it available as well. So I think we have reviewed the effectiveness of our distribution of getting it into schools, but as the Member of Youth Parliament has helpfully pointed out, there may be other groups who'd find it useful as well, and be happy to make it available to them, because like I say, it's put out with the intention of supporting whoever needs support, and so we just need to make sure it gets into the right hands. But like I say, I think from a response to your original question, Chair, I think we are confident it got to its target audience, or was available to its target audience, but maybe we should be looking to make even more use of it.
Thank you, Neil. Jane, I believe your hand was up next.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And the previous conversation was really heartening. I was going to say that I thought all that information was, such a lot of work went into it, and it was really, really well presented and very, very useful to a lot of people. So obviously the wider it's circulated, the better. I wanted to centre my comments and questions to Neil on the survey, or the two surveys that you mentioned. The school survey was only open for 6 days, I believe, which was quite a short period. The other one, the SEND one, was a bit longer, but I believe there are around 4,000 parent carers with the SEND and of children. And so 78 responses seems quite a low number. And I just wondered what how many of those parents and carers of children with disabilities, how many of those were actually sent the survey? How widely was it distributed? And so of the number of surveys you sent out, what proportion is 78 of that, as well as of the wider number that there are in BCP area, please?
Okay, thank you, Kelly, for your question. So to confirm, you know, if we're talking about children with the HCPs, it is around 4,000. Obviously, the number of families is slightly less than that, siblings and those sorts of things. But absolutely, that is the cohort that we're talking about. As you say, 78 is a small response. However, we were at the time that this was being undertaken, we were balancing wanting to get feedback as quickly as possible, you know, so that it could inform our forward thinking and give us an overview with reach. And as you say, it was quite a short period of time, and it was at a time, you'll understand, when there was an awful lot going on. You know, this is and in the last year, when would not been a time when there's lots of it's fair to say. So through Parent Care Forum, another group, we publicised that this was available and that we were seeking feedback through the schools themselves, through the special schools, as you can imagine. We asked for responses. So I think we did try to access that cohort as best we can. However, it's fair to say that there were probably other priorities at the time, and families, you know, perhaps didn't feel able to respond in the numbers that we would have liked. And as I said earlier, I think we need to revisit this now. The term has really got underway, and there is a certain level of stability, although it probably doesn't feel like it to schools still, about how we revisit this and take this forward again. But like I say, it was a useful exercise in getting a feel for what the parental experience was. But I don't think we'd be selling it as a representative survey where 78 of, say, 3,500 families. You know, it is what it is. It was a short, sharp. What does this look like within our community of families? What messages can we take away, and how can we move forward? And that, of course, is triangulated with the feedback we get through schools and the feedback we get from families direct through the SND team and others. So I do entirely accept this was a small sample, but it was still, I think, a useful exercise to, as I say, triangulate the feedback we've been getting from elsewhere. And like I say, finally, you know, something we need to revisit because things are different. Things have changed again. And
exactly. Yeah. So this time, perhaps we could try and get to a larger cohort, or a larger number of that cohort, to try and get a broader feel for the answers. There was one bit on page 129. There was a reference to not all students. One of the responses was not all students had access to technology. I think, and I remember at the last. I'm not sure if this was. Actually, it may have been, it's 129 from the student forum rather than from the survey, I'm not sure. But at the last meeting, we were assured that you had adequate provision of laptops and technology. But this seemed to be suggesting that some people were left without that kind of thing. And I just wondered whether, you know, that was the case, or it was a sort of, I don't know, mixed message of some sort.
Yeah, and that's a really relevant question as well. And the situation changes rapidly. You'll remember before Christmas, in the autumn term, the government had a scheme to provide laptops to vulnerable children,
yes.
And we were successful in attracting about 1,200 of those and distributing them. And that was on top of the work that was done by the virtual school to support looked after children. Yeah. And the work that we did with schools to lend out their own equipment over that period of time. I think as we moved into a more comprehensive remote learning offer, it's become clear we're moving outside of that cohort. Now, we're not just talking about vulnerable children or looked after children or children in care and those sorts of things. There is a wider need for this additional capacity. And so the government scheme this term is about supporting schools as they have a significant outbreak or they close a bubble or a year group and those sort of things. And we're working with schools to manage that. Beyond that, there is a cohort of children who don't fall within the remit of that. And so we're working with schools to deliver ICT to them, once again through schools lending out their equipment, but also through donations. And we are working with companies, other organisations who've approached us to say, you know, could you make use of additional ICT capacity? What I can say is that we have raised this as a concern with schools, and their feedback has been that they are looking to support children who don't have access to technology through other routes to remote learning, whether that's delivering learning to them directly or as I say, sharing equipment and those sorts of things. So I think the situation is that there is a demand for additional laptops. We are hearing that. We are going through a number of routes about how we deliver it, and certainly, you know, in some areas like the children in care in the virtual school, I think we've completely finished that now. But in other areas, there's still work to be done. But like I say, schools are trying to be as flexible as possible to ensure that that's not a barrier to learning, but there is more to be done.
Yeah, it's interesting because not that long ago, we were all given new laptops as members with BCP Council, and we gave our old ones back, our HP ones, and I don't know what happened to them and whether they could be reused and, you know, recycled in this respect, whether they're too old or I don't know. But it seemed to me there must be a big heap of old BCP or Bournemouth Council laptops somewhere.
I think there are two parts to the answer to that question, Councillor Kelly, which is a very good one. The first one is I think lots of those as staff have had to remote work, have been recycled as best they can to support staff in working, because obviously those laptops are set up to work on our networks. The second thing is the online learning platforms that schools use generally work on a Windows 10 basis now, so the laptop has to be capable of running Windows 10. It's not just a you know, an internet device. There's actually more to it to attach to the learning platform. So, and then beyond that, we have to rebuild every laptop that we give out in order to make sure it's got the appropriate safeguarding software and everything else on it, and it links up with the school. So we have asked that question, and the council certainly have provided some laptops, but only those that are going to fit in within the request that's being made, which, as you can imagine, it is not that many, because the ones we're disposing of are being disposed of for a good reason.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. Can I just follow up this with what you're questioning there, Jane? Because I was talking about the laptops, and I'm asking you, Neil, but I'm also asking members of the Youth Parliament if they've got any example of this. Are any young people having problems not due to the equipment, but purely due to broadband in their area where they live, access in their house? And is that holding up any learning?
So if I answer first, if that's okay. So in the first government scheme, there was the ability for us to issue dongles, 4G dongles, so that people's had access through the mobile phone network, and we did that. I think 300 or 400 of those were allocated, and post Christmas, the government have arranged for discounted access to the 3G or 4G network to enable parents to use their phones to enable access to the internet. However, it was interesting, you know, we actually got very few concerns raised with us about technology, certainly before Christmas, and the ones that we did have all related to access to the internet, rather than the laptop not working or those sorts of things. And we were able to address those, like I say, through using the dongles the government have provided and those sorts of things. So whilst I'm not getting direct feedback, I don't think that is a significant concern. It is the area that caused the concern, and something we should absolutely be aware of, and continue to support schools in making sure that that pupils are able to access the internet. But you're absolutely right to raise it, because that has been a concern. But as of today, I haven't had any specific issues raised with me, which doesn't mean they're not in schools, but only that they're being managed at that level.
Thank you very much, Neil. Now, Adair, you put your hand up. Is that to answer my point, or is it for a question?
Yes, to answer your point.
Great.
Well, I know from personal experience and from like many people I've spoken to that this often happens because of broadband, and it's normally like weather dependent. So if the weather's been very bad recently, like it's been raining today, for example, it might not work as well. And what there's been a continuity among many schools is that if there's an online lesson, it's not always on. They can't always access it later if they weren't able to join like the meeting because of like broadband issues. So I think it's really important to make sure there's always like they can access it at a later time if they weren't able to access it at the time, if that makes sense.
That does make total sense. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Sandra, I believe your hand is next.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, obviously this was, and I thank the officer and the young people for their presentations, and clearly a great deal of consideration and much effort has gone into developing these programmes and making them available to our schools and to our young people. Obviously, I share concerns about the mental health of our young people, but I also have concerns about the well-being of our teachers, because the guidelines have changed slightly during this lockdown and more categories of key worker are included. So we now have more children of key workers attending school than before, and teachers are now finding themselves having to teach in class as well, and at the same time as teaching remotely. So that must be pretty hard for them at the moment. And it's also been in the media recently that everyone's calling for schools to reopen as soon as possible for a number of, including children's mental health, and that students will have to catch up. The concern that students are going to have to catch up from the widening gap caused by the impact of COVID. And I want to sort of digress a bit here, but can I say that I know that there's been a proposal in the council budget papers for £1 million fund specifically to help local children to do this catch up. And I know this is going to the ONS board next week, but can I, be cheeky and ask whether the officer or perhaps the portfolio holder would like to give some further details now? I totally support it. I'm not trying to be difficult. Basically, I'm just being nosy, and I would be grateful if somebody could give me a little bit more information, if that's okay. Thank you, Chair.
I'm happy to start, Councillor Moore, and firstly, can I echo your concerns for the mental health of teachers, who are being an awful lot is being asked of this term. As you say, we are requiring remote learning in face-to-face learning, and a number of pupils in school is significantly higher than it was last term, and heads are having to deploy their resources very creatively to manage both of those requirements, to make both a meaningful experience, a meaningful experience, learning experience in school, and a meaningful learning experience at home. And many of them are doing that through having a rota of, a group of teachers are in, a group of teachers doing remote learning, and moving that around. But that is an awful lot of new skills to pick up very quickly, and a lot of expectation being put on teachers from parents, from pupils, from society as a whole. And I agree that is something that we need to recognise it as we go forward, that they will need support for that as well, and also because they miss the interaction of being in the classroom. That's the feedback I've got when I've spoken to teachers, is that that being in the classroom with the pupils is what they came into the job for, what they want to be, and actually not to have that is equally as saddening as it is for the pupils who are missing their friends, and that's for sure. In terms of catch up, absolutely. It's a really key element of the return to school. How do we support children to progress back to the level that they've missed? One of the issues that's been raised, of course, is, with online learning, are children writing? Are they actually, physically making mark on the paper? And is that something they're going to fall back on, and something we need to support? And so we need to be as creative as possible with the use of any resource to the catch up. And you'll be aware that the government had the scheme about tutors and other things. I think we need to be more creative looking forward about how we have a more general uplift, rather than targeting individual pupils with all of the resource. It needs to be a much broader based offer that we give. I don't know if Councillor Green was going to respond to that as well.
I just noticed, Councillor Green, you have your hand up, Nicola. So I'm assuming you want to respond to this.
Well, thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. Yes, Sandra, I'm listening, I think, is the comment.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
No, I was just making some notes, actually, Chairman, just wondering whether I might just come in at the end to respond to some of those points, and perhaps anything else that does come, because essentially what I want to say is, yes, I'm listening to this debate with absolute interest in the light of what we're trying to do through the budget. So if I could perhaps ask to come back later rather than now in detail.
I would be delighted if you... Georgia, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for Neil. For the parent carer survey, instead of asking the young people themselves, what kind of made you decide to ask parents instead?
I think that's a good question, and we need both sets of views. It's really important. I think it was specifically about parents' perception of the impact that COVID was having on the pupils. So that was the question that was being asked, and hence the direction of the survey that was undertaken. But that doesn't diminish from the fact that the views of pupils are equally, if not more so important, of course. And so we need to be listening to those as well. As I said, looking to the future as we move into this term and another different set of circumstances, when we look at how we undertake this again, I think we would absolutely want to take a broader based approach. But this was done, as was said earlier, at pace in order to get a view of what we could do to support. And looking to the future, I think we would absolutely be looking for a broader base to that feedback. So the reason it's there is because that was the question that was being asked, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be asking other questions and making sure we get all the views that we need.
Would you like to come back on that at all?
No, I was just going to say, would there be any consideration in the future of using us as Youth Parliament to get feedback from your actual younger people in these reports?
I'm very confident to say we'd be very happy to do that and to work with you to agree the best way in order to get a rounded view from as many people as possible. So absolutely happy to do that, and I'll make sure my colleagues are aware of that and will engage when we get to that stage.
Great, thank you.
Well, that actually sounds like a very good offer. Actually, that could actually do some work for you, Neil. There. Just before I come back to you, Nicola, I'd like to sort of echo what Sandra said. I was going to mention it. I'm glad she did because I'm a former teacher. Therefore, I didn't want to sound like I was just shouting about my former colleagues. But I do know that a lot of schools are finding it very difficult with all the things. At secondary schools, people think they're closed, but of course they're not. About 10% what I'm saying pupils in, Neil, I'm guessing. Therefore, a lot of teachers are having to deliver real classes, online classes, become cleaners as well, sanitising, checking, testing. Therefore, I myself are very aware of this. Nicola, you said you'd like to come back at the end. I don't think anybody else got a hand up, so I think back to you.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity to respond. There was a really interesting bulk of stuff that's come to you this evening, and I found it really helpful to be reading through that. I think we have to go back to that Ofsted finding at the back end of last year about the impact that COVID and the lockdown that they were talking about at the time was having on children, how they are the hardest hit amongst society as a result of this dreadful pandemic. And of course, since then, we're now in another national lockdown, and we need to be very clear about the picture, that the impact. So the intention in putting some money into the budget was exactly to provide some investment into young people's health and it's their well-being, their mental well-being particularly, as well as their need to catch up. There is clearly further work to do, and Sandra, I can't give you any information now because, as you'll know, there is work to do in taking the budget through the democratic process. And one can't presume, but I'd like to give the young people perhaps some assurance, and I really welcome the challenge that's come back, and thank you for your comments, that this is an absolute commitment from councillors to how important we think you are. and you know, £1 million is a lot of money in a council budget, although I'm sure we could spend it several times over. But it is a real commitment, and I think that you might see a bit of ding dong in politics about certain decisions that are to be made in terms of where we prioritise our money. But I genuinely do not expect this to be one of them, and I you know, I'm always very grateful for the cross-party support that there has been around investing in children's services. So really, thank you for the work that's already gone in. And if you've got anything else that you know, you feel would really help inform our decisions, I know you've got a very direct line to Councillor Burton, and we will, I hope, stay in close touch as we hope to drive this forward, and also, you know, to make sure that it has the impact that it needs to. It's not there to make us feel better. It's to provide real impact in the lives and the learning of young people. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for that, Nicola. I have to get in my soapbox for a minute because you put it out there for me, because I feel very strongly that COVID has been a big problem for the older population, but the lockdown has been a huge problem for the younger population, and then it's been quite unfair because they've had to suffer a lot to protect other people. Ade, you just come back to you before I summarise and we move on.
Thank you, Chair, and it's great to hear about this £1 million package to help young people. But I think something that might help you with investing that money is that when we spoke to many people said that the thing that affected their mental health the most was social interaction, not being able to join their clubs and extracurriculars anymore. So it'd be great if it could not just focus like academically, but like you said, also well-being and trying to, like, as best you can within the circumstances, make sure these activities are still being run, like whether online or in person. So that's really great to see, though. Thank you so much, Nicola.
That's an immensely helpful steer. Thank you.
Neil, you've just raised your hand.
I need to perhaps have a helpful comment on that, which is that through the winter grant fund money the government made available, some of that is to be targeted at holiday activities. So that may support the point that's just been made about the clubs and other things that go along with that, and we absolutely want to be consulting on how best that's invested to ensure that money is used as well as it can be.
Right, thank you very much. So I'll just try to summarise. I've got some notes here, but we've had such a wide-ranging discussion. It's going to be a bit difficult for me, but I'll do my best. We started talking about online learning, consistency of a provision, and sharing best practice, which I think we're quite keen on. We were particularly keen on the people with protected characteristics and people who were particularly struggling, and we wanted to note that. We were a little concerned about the number of answers to the survey, and we'll be quite like to see. I think we all appreciate that getting a survey in lockdown, and surveys are always very difficult, but more people answering the survey, and the young people was talking about it would be nice if they had been surveyed as well, to help with that data. Where we seem to go on, I've just realised the equipment, I suppose it is part of mental health, but it was a concern to a lot of people. So we talked about equipment, the internet access, and finally a little bit of a discussion about the fund that is likely to be available to help, and a request that some of that could be used to help with social interaction in clubs. I don't think I've missed anything there from our discussions. So in that case, we'll go on to item number 7. So this is the recent Ofsted visit and outcome. So this item will be visited regularly at Children's ONS. It's sort of almost a standing item now. Concerns highlighted by last year's Ofsted's focus visit has pointed us in the direction of areas of high priority, which I know members of the committee are keen to understand and scrutinise. I believe, Elaine, you are going to be presenting this report with help from Anthony Douglas. So if I could introduce Elaine, in fact, you could also introduce Anthony to us when it comes down to that.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, committee members. I am Elaine Redding, and I am the Interim Corporate Director for Children's Services, and I'll just hand over to Anthony Douglas to introduce himself.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. Anthony Douglas. I'm the Department for Education Advisor for BCP Council.
Chair, would you like me to just go to the headlines on the report and then we're going to talk through on the action plan?
I think that's probably the best way to do it, Elaine. Thank you.
Okay, so the lead up to this agenda item, the stall has been set out really clearly, hasn't it? We are 4 months into post Ofsted, a third lockdown, and that we are continuing to make improvements in children's services. And, you know, notwithstanding what's been said about the impact of COVID on children, young people and families, the realisation of a whole academic year being disrupted. That's the reality of what we're facing now. And the council's response to that needs to look very different to anything any of us would have experienced in our professional or personal times. So, you know, the ambition of the council and the commitment and determination is throughout the whole of the department, and that it actually isn't just Children's Social Care Department. There's a relentless focus on corporate parenting, and I do remember one of my colleagues, you know, being very vocal appropriately about don't forget the role of corporate parenting. So, you know, we have a number of levers that we can and we are using to enable us to respond to that disruption in education in a way that will be unrecognisable to anything we've done before. So I am genuinely very excited about what we're going to be able to provide, and the Youth Parliament and the work that's happened, particularly on the mental health cards, just shows already that the young people, they know what they want, and the parents know what support that they need. It's our job as systems leaders to facilitate that. So I don't want to say any more on the education, but I felt very strongly that I wanted to recognise the work and also the challenge and our determination to continue to do what we can on the back of the pandemic. So in terms of Ofsted, as I say, 4 months in, the action plan, I'm going to invite Anthony to talk through that in a bit more detail, and the 7 obsessions. I would I've set myself a personal challenge, notwithstanding being the corporate director for Children's Social Care, that everywhere I go, I would like people to say obsessions to me, because that is the framework that we're going to be using to monitor the impact of what we are doing as a whole service, corporate directorates as well. So the report, I think, is deliberately short. I hope that you would welcome that. It cuts to the chase. That's the way we like to do business. It's a commitment that we've made to overview and scrutiny, to serve you with information that allows you to scrutinise as you see fit. The summary page at the back mainly talks about the financial implications and the commitments that are being made. I wasn't going to go into great detail on that, because as has already been set out, there is a democratic process that is being, you know, is currently underway and won't be concluded for a few more weeks. But it is spout out there what the ambition is. Despite the lockdown, we still have very good staff resilience. About 75% of our workforce are still able to deliver critical services for children and young people. I don't know if that will stay as high as that, given that we have now got lateral flow testing for our staff, and some of our staff are also subject to being prioritised for the vaccine. And obviously, when you start testing, there is an increased probability that some staff may well be test positive and therefore need to isolate. So we may see a deterioration in the workforce as a result of that, but we have a plan in place to be able to respond to it. This most significant change in the last 4 months has been about the clarity and the way in which we order the work. And you may recall when I spoke before, I was talking about how the challenge was not insurmountable and it was a failure of leadership and management and the way in which we'd ordered the work. We have now got processes in place that are clear and linear, so it makes it easier for staff and also for our families to understand what it is that we're doing, why we're doing it, and when we're doing it. And we know with that is a bedrock for good local authorities. So it's we have been able to put that in place alongside keeping high spirits and energy levels within the leadership team and within the workforce. Now, I'm not going to, I'm not going to pretend that we've got everything sorted. You wouldn't believe me anyway. But they're the fundamentals around how we wish to deliver children's services, and the articulation of that is absolutely key for us to be able to build on the rest of the improvements that are required. So I just wanted to set that context, Chair. I don't know if there's any questions on the report before I hand over to Anthony to talk about the work that he's doing with the service, high challenge, high support, in the development of and the level of scrutiny that is going on around the action plan. So I'll pause at that point, Chair.
To be honest, I think it'd probably be best if we heard from Anthony first, and then we went through the questions, because they may dovetail into each other.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, what's to say? I think we made a good start. There's been tremendous political commitment. That's the first thing to say, because no council with children's services difficulties can improve without political commitment. That's been outstanding, and it's cross-party and it's a consensus. And it's crucial to maintain that consensus for the duration of this improvement period, which is likely to be 2 years until BCP can be graded as good, or to stand a fighting chance of that. So that means that your committee is a great check and balance, as is my work, I hope, on progress, because there's nothing worse than a false start or putting in programs that don't lead anywhere. So hence I've been, or tried to be, all over the service like a rash, so as to make sure the programs are the right ones to get to a much better place for children, young people and their families. So the 7 obsessions and the 15-point action plan may sound a lot, but sometimes in this area you get 150-point action plans. So we've tried to keep them to the irreducible minimum, so that all areas of the action plan have to be part delivered simultaneously. Obviously, some go faster than others, some have a natural lifespan and can't be delivered straight away, but fundamental improvement needs to be achieved in the first few months, hence the importance of the work that's being done. So I have holding to account meetings every fortnight with lead officers, and also, as Elaine said, the role is to support and challenge. I'm confident that the building blocks have been put in place. That doesn't mean the service is better or good enough. It means that the right things are being done to get to that point in a few months' time. But I have been heartened by progress in 2 or 3 services, and I thought I'd just mention those if I may. The first is the rather inelegantly called MASH, which is the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub. It's where all new referrals to children's services go. And it's a multi-agency hub with police, health and education, heavily criticised by Ofsted last year. But the systems and processes have been changed, not fundamentally, but enough so that the right children are ending up in the right service much quicker. The next stage is to make sure the assessments are much better. That will take a little bit longer. And the second area is the family court applications to remove children. One of the biggest jobs that a local authority has and a court has. And those applications are now much better grounded, they're more professionally handled, better scrutinised, and better performance managed. So those are examples which prove that BCP can improve rapidly. It's still not quite fast enough. The difficulty with that is if you go too fast, you risk alienating staff whose morale is crucial to maintain and build. It's always difficult at a time like this, but generally, unless you go really fast with improvement, the months go by and you find you haven't got to the place you need to get to. What else should I mention? I think probably that just to join with all of you about the impact of the COVID pandemic on schools, particularly on the mental health of children and young people, and on improvement work. It limits the amount of improvement work that can happen by definition, because so much time has to go into managing the pandemic and its implications and its repercussions. And I suppose one area that illustrates that is it's harder for children in care to go home. They often need an intensive programme of work to help them to go home for it to be safe. And that intensive work of home visits and pulling in other agencies is just much harder because of the various restrictions that go with COVID. So COVID will be with us for some time, clearly. In fact, one virologist I spoke to said 10 years. That's a dreadful thought. But nevertheless, it's important for the council to make steady progress and to continuously improve. There's no magic bullet about this, but committee by committee, you'll want to see, as I do, significant changes and improvement. But there we are. The next one I'm looking for is improvements in the quality of frontline practice, because they're the ones that will impact upon children themselves. Obviously, improving processes to have less delay, more focus will help, but that's no guarantee. What you need is better practice, and that's a matter of practice education, practice leadership and performance management. I'll stop at that point, Chair, proportionately.
Right, thank you very much. With questionings on this, I'm going to be quite strict and ask people to do one question at a time rather than have a list, because I know I have quite a list here, and I don't want to just go through my list, because I think I could ask you questions on this for 2 hours myself. So I'm going to ask people just one question, and then we'll revolve round and see how things go. I'm just going to kick off because strangely my first point was about corporate parenting, and you mentioned that, Elaine, right at the beginning, because I'm very aware of our role as corporate parents, and I do feel quite a lot of councillors and people who work for the council would really like to be better corporate parents, but don't know how to do that. So my question is how can we be better corporate parents in our roles, and how can we be directed to do that?
Would you like me to answer that, Chair?
I think probably that was directed towards you, yes.
Yes, good. Okay, so what I would really welcome is some personal emails to me, just basically telling me what it is you'd like to offer. This doesn't have to be an institution or a process, you know, as I said before, it's the ability to be able to care or love for another child that's not yours. And you'll all have different experiences of how to do that. So I would like to put the invitation back, Chair, to all members just to email me personally and say, this is what I think I can offer. If you're an employee, then then you might be able to offer something around employment or work experience. But just tell me what it is, and then we will work with those generous offers and make sure that we realise corporate parenting across the council from a place that is not a process or an institution. It's driven by care and passion.
Thank you. I think probably if members of this committee are happy, I'm sure us as a committee could email all members and put that request forward. I think it looked quite welcoming from this committee to make that suggestion. So if everybody else is happy, we'll organise that. Lisa Northover, Lisa, you were first with your hand.
Ooh, Great, thank you. My question is on the number 8, develop a more open and inclusive culture, and it's around the issue of staff morale, which I think one issue is about staff turnover and children having a number of support workers over time. And it says that the evidence base is about workloads being manageable and staff feeling the risks that they hold are shared with managers. And it also talks about having the staff survey. So I was interested in knowing if the staff survey, is that what it talks about? Is that the main thing that people, that it's workloads? Is that what is causing the issues around staff? Or are there other things? Because I wonder if not all of the staff even have a workload, I don't think. So I wonder if that has been explored as well, around, you know, the way people are managed, things like that. I wonder if it really is just around the workloads and feeling that they are holding risks.
So I'll start, and then Anthony, if you want to contribute, please do. So you're absolutely right, Councillor. It isn't just about workload. So you know, it is, as we acknowledged early on in our improvement journey. You know, if good social workers will stay if they feel supported. Both the work is emotionally draining, particularly challenging in this particular in the COVID period. But if you have a manager and a team that you feel that you are part of and that you are striving for the things that are important to children and young people, then morale will naturally follow, and you will have that sense of being able to contribute and make a difference in your day-to-day coming into work. So it isn't just about caseloads, and it isn't just about money, although the recruitment and retention payment has been very well received. That's made us competitive with our neighbours. So, you know, that's something that that members need to hold on to. You know, it's been, as I say, been well received, and it makes a difference for children and young people, because then they don't have so many changes in social worker. So it is a combination of factors, and creating an environment for social work to flourish is a phrase that you will probably become very familiar to you through conversations with me. And to do that means you have to invest in your staff, as well as give them an opportunity to influence and shape, along with the young people, about how they think the service should be being delivered. That goes back to the point Anthony made about you have to try and get the timing right. You can't go too fast, because you will alienate social workers, managers, educational psychologists, SEND specialists, business support colleagues, finance colleagues, anybody that's got a footprint in helping us deliver the services. And children and young people will not be part of making the service good. So I'll stop at that point, and I'll hand over to Anthony for any other observations.
Well, yes, you've got some very happy and well-performing teams, and some teams in crisis. I suppose with 1,100 staff, you'll have the range of opinion, but whilst you've got some long-term committed staff who are committed to BCP, just want to see it get better, there are many staff, too many, who love the job but don't love the organisation. And that's been because of failures of leadership and management inside the service in the past. I'm not just saying that, it's obvious. And that's why it's important now to get the leadership and management right, to restore staff confidence over time. And obviously with interim managers, it's a difficult time for everybody, because with interim managers, you often feel, well, they're going to go in a few months, what's the point? So somehow the interim managers have to give the staff that security and stability so that the organisation ticks over in the background without making so much noise. The point about surveys was to try to get closer to these issues in real time as they're happening, so that if a problem is going wrong in a team, to be on top of it quickly, not with a big survey months later, but as it's happening. So one of the good points that one of the good support systems that has been set up is a progress forum initiated by a frontline practitioner with other staff supporting her, and their intentions to survey staff, probably through SurveyMonkey, issue by issue, quite quickly, so that you can take the temperature of the organisation as it goes along. So the two programmes for the Improvement Board I chair that I'll mention are firstly working with some children to see if their experience of being looked after by BCP improves over time. That's the most important thing. And secondly, with staff to track their experience, to make sure that their experience is also getting better, because if you have unhappy staff, you won't have a good service to children. So they're interrelated as issues, and as Elaine said, this needs to be taken forward in a careful and constructive way, but certainly low morale correlates with high sickness levels, high use of agency staff, and the goal here is to get all teams to be fundamentally permanent staff, high performing with a good immediate manager, so that agency staff, they'll always be needed, even in the most successful organisations, but not many.
Thank you, Lisa. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Right.
If later, if you have time, I'd like another question.
Yeah. Just raise your hand at the bottom of the list, and I'll come back to you, Lisa. Jane, you were next.
Thank you very much, Chairman. It was really good to hear the introductions and presentations from both Elaine and Anthony, because I can see that with the clarity with which they understand and can see our what probably can be only called failings in the past, and also the way that we are challenging those issues, and determination to succeed is absolutely amazing. So I'm sure that our children in the borough are going to really benefit from this work. It's interesting that I picked out item 8 on the list there about the open and inclusive culture, because the phrase that I really like is culture being as important as strategy. And I think that's really true, that we must change the culture in our children's services and make sure that children are absolutely at the heart of everything, and their needs are paramount. And I can see from what you've been saying that this is the way we're going. So thank you very much. And we really, I look forward to seeing or hearing about the progress that we make over the time, and, you know, meeting after meeting. Because as Anthony said, you know, we must all challenge and make sure that this really happens. So thank you for what you've done so far.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. I don't think there's actually a question there, was the Jane? No, so I'll move on to the. No, that's perfectly all right. It's nice not to have all questions all the time. That's Sandra. You were next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think I should have indicated earlier, because I was going to ask lots of questions about staffing, but Lisa's got there first. And I was also going to ask about the MASH, but that's also been answered. However, what I need to say is that in the interest of transparency, I should have let you know that I also attend the group leaders briefings on the action plan. What I have got left on my list to ask about was the mosaic system. I know it's caused all sorts of grief in the past, and I just wonder, have you been able to resolve it all, and how's it all progressing? Thank you.
So it is mosaic. It is interesting, Councillor, because it has caused tensions, but it's actually a system that, if implemented properly and not corrupted in the way in which I suggest children's services are very good at doing, finding workarounds when systems don't work for us. It's actually a system that good and outstanding local authorities use. So, you know, it isn't actually the mosaic, it's been the implementation of it. The lack of clarity in terms of the way in which we ordered the work has actually manifested itself through the workflows on Mosaic. It really is as simple as that. If you deconstructed a piece of computer equipment and you looked at it, you probably see all of the levels of chaos within that electronically that we have experienced outside of that in terms of putting processes in place. So that's the context. But the short answer is yes. So we are migrating the care director. You will know about care director, Councillor, more from your previous involvement with children's social care. There are cases that are being migrated onto Mosaic, and we are actioning that at a level of pace, appropriate pace, but pace nevertheless. And in terms of the changes that are happening to Mosaic, we are making sure that those changes are synchronized with the workflows. So we don't make a change in isolation. So a good example was today I had a meeting about supervision and staff supervision, and why was the recording of staff supervision such a knotty issue? It is in lots of local authorities, to be frank. And one of the things that is getting in the way of timely recording is that the system asks you to tick a box once you have read your supervision notes before they can be uploaded. Well, you can imagine a busy social worker or a busy team manager. You're not going to go to the top of the pile, are you, to read your supervision notes? You're going to go out on a visit and see a child or a young person, or you're going to be offering another supervision too. So that is a really good example of how I'm sure it was put in good faith as a way of offering some false assurance, I would suggest, because it hasn't worked, on if supervisions are taking place or not. So yes, there is a plan. It will take a bit longer because of the interruptions with COVID, but we are investing in and the service, to be fair. You know, the staff have been very clear with me about the things that they find very irritating about Mosaic, so we are changing the workflows. I don't know if that's answered your question, Councillor.
Yeah, that's fine. Yes, you've got it under control.
Thank you very much for that answer. Beverley, I believe you are next.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got about 3 questions, so I just go with the first one, shall I? And then we'll come back round if
yeah, go with the first one, then we'll come back.
If we're still awake. My first, first I want to say that Councillor Kelly actually has, I think, articulated certainly the level of comfort that I'm starting to get now about some of these issues, so thank you for that. I won't elaborate on what she said, but my first question is around the Partnership Academy. I'd like to know just a little bit about that, more about that, please. Who's in it? Who makes up that Partnership Academy, and where perhaps the parent carer groups might feature in that, or if they don't, they might feature elsewhere.
Okay, I'm going to hand over to Anthony, because this is something that is a live issue that we're working on in terms of the development of the Academy and the partnership interface. So Anthony, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, happily. And in fact, I'm putting together an improvement toolkit for BCP and holding meetings with staff and voluntary groups. So I met with the Parent Carer Forum on a couple of issues. So it has been important to include people, that's part of being an inclusive culture, in policy development. But the Academy was envisaged as a multi-agency academy so that frontline staff are trained and supported to the highest levels of practice. Stage 1 is to give newly qualified staff the best possible induction and best possible first year. So it starts as an ASYE, that's the supported first year for them. But then the aspiration is for it to be the first multi-agency partnership academy in the country. And what that would mean, and that I think reflects the level of ambition of the council, it would mean that frontline staff, whether it's about vulnerability or about coercive control in relationships, whatever it might be, the latest issues in use of drugs, drug misuse, are all equipped with similar knowledge in order to make a similar response to the local public and citizens. So an integrated public sector, but that's a little way off to begin with and starting small. We've been meeting with Bournemouth University, who are one of the top universities for children's social care. In particular, one particular lecturer who's very keen to come and work very closely with us and has a particular interest in the service becoming a child-centred service, the importance of the child's story, the importance in reports of the child leaping off the page so you understand them, making sure that timescales are the child's timescales, not bureaucratic timescales. So the Academy is seen as a place in which all that learning and development can be brigaded and made available to everybody, including parents and carers, who are, after all, the carrying out the most care in the community.
Chairman, that sounds absolutely marvellous. Thank you for that. I had no idea it was aiming at that level. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Well, I think it's a microcosm of BCP. It's early days, starting small, but you have got an ambition to be amongst the very best, which is fabulous.
Thank you.
Thank you. So it's time to go round again. I'm going to start with my next question. I noticed the independent reviewing officer scrutiny. There was said it hasn't been strong enough, and that sort of my ears pricked up on that. So can you just explain how it's going to be made stronger in future?
So the independent reviewing officers are there to offer high support and high challenge to social workers and managers about the progression of plans and for children and young people, particularly around permanency or for their ever families, including the wishes and feelings. So they should know that young person as well as anybody that is supporting the family or the young person. And where we have significant weaknesses is in the consistency of knowing the needs of those children and young people. So the response to it is a tailored action plan that sits outside the 15-point action plan that they do talk to each other, the documents, but it's a detailed plan that is being led by the head of quality assurance. She is supporting the team manager and the IROs to understand in greater detail how you engage with children and young people and how you not only affect change for them but actually do it with a sense of urgency and a sense of pace and purpose is one of the phrases that I've learned from Anthony, because it just fits so well for us. But the sense of urgency is what Councillor is missing within that particular area of the service. And it is a consequence of when you sort out the as Anthony was describing earlier, the court work. So the children that were waiting, that Ofsted found, where there wasn't permanency planning, they all have permanency plans now, as you would expect. But a consequence of that means that the other interdependencies within the service have to be able to keep up with that sense of urgency and being able to move at the same level of. So we have set the pace, and everybody needs to continue at that pace. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
That does. Thank you very much. Lisa Northover, it's down to your second question now.
Ooh, thank you. I was looking at the final number 15 and corporate contributions to the transformation of children's services, which I'm assuming is the whole local authority being a part of delivering this, which I think is really good, because I think sometimes the rest of the local authority can actually be the barrier to getting on with something for a child. So this is really good. I was looking at apprenticeships for children in care and increasing the number of apprenticeships. Does this mean that the council can make apprenticeships that are for just children in care? Is that actually something that is possible to do? Because I think that would be great if that is possible to do, but I don't know if that's kind of allowed to to choose children in care.
So I can answer that, and then I'm going to hand over to Anthony. So the short answer is yes, we can. We are a family business, and family businesses create opportunities for their families. Yes, we can apply that way of being. The number 15, and I'll let Anthony talk in detail it, because Anthony is holding the corporate management team to scrutiny on their delivery of it. This is in response to Graham coming to overview and scrutiny and saying, and you may recall, the problems in children's services are not just Elaine's, and they're not just children's services, they are corporate, and this is in response to it. So I think I've probably, I've set the scene for that. So I'm going to hand over to Anthony to talk about the scrutiny, particularly around the corporate interface, because there's housing projects going on as well. There's some exciting strands to that, Councillor. Anthony.
Well, yes, briefly, the importance of improvement stretches from the leader of the council right the way through to every member of staff. And what's been particularly encouraging, as well as the political support, is the support from corporate managers. And just some examples, as Elaine said, to develop a care leavers hub is hugely important as a focal point in the area, possibly two, for young people to drop into that they can call their own place. And that should really be there already. But despite that, it is happening now through some real input from Bill Cotton and the housing people. It's a specific project that is moving quite fast. There are opportunities with the current structure of housing finance to pursue housing funding models in partnership that could put in place some units, small units, including SEND, that will enable BCP to look after more young people locally than to send them out of BCP. And whilst you might always have to place some children and young people for specialist purposes, a lot who are outside could come back. So particularly for the future, that's a brilliant project. Apprenticeships, the chief executive has personal responsibility for that one. And yes, it's inside the council and working with firms across the council to increase the available chances for some of our most vulnerable kids. That's a terrific programme. And I think what we've done is to create some momentum about what the council as a whole can do to improve children's services. It takes a whole council to improve a children's service, as you've said. So that's been particularly gratifying because it wasn't the picture I was given before starting my work with you. So I think there have been some big shifts in attitude and commitment, not least, although this may not be the committee to go into it, but not least with the financial support that's being talked about through the lead members, leader of the council, chief executive, and the section 151 officer, the director of finance. And it really will be investment to save, because if you get this service right, it will balance its budget and it will not have the problems you've got now.
Has that answered it, Councillor, between us?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
Right, thank you. I think we're back to Beverley, because you had some more questions, didn't you?
I do, thank you, Chairman. It's around the early, excuse my right here, I've got my documents on the screen to the left of me. It's around the education healthcare assessment and plans, which is what, section 4, referral and handling, and it's around the audits, I think, and really about the quality of them. And I raise that because one of the issues that has come out to me in the communications or the chats with I had parent carers was around these particular, the assessments and the plans that come out of them. And the feedback I got was a lot of them were quite woolly, and they are meant to be quite specific. So rather than saying this particular child needs some speech therapy, they should be more specific. That says, you know, this child needs 2 times XYZ from ABC, and it was really about the quality assurance going into that, to make sure that they are specific as they're required to be, because if that doesn't happen, the parent can't move forward, they can't go to the next stage, they're sort of in a bit of a not quite sure what to do and bashed from pillar to post, which is how I've picked it up from parents. So it's some assurances around that, please, Chairman.
So we did have Simon Mackenzie, who is the head of Send Improvement. Yes, just as I speak, as magic you appear, Simon. So Councillor Dunlop, I'm going to invite Simon to respond to that, because it is close to his heart too. And I know that Anthony will be sitting there able to validate if it is required, because we've just had a report on Send exactly on quality assurance that I have just submitted to the DFE advisor, Anthony Douglas. So your question is very timely. So Simon, over to you.
So to put into context, whilst the SEN team may write the assessments, it is dependent on the reports coming in and the advice from other professionals, so whether it's from health or educational psychologists and schools. So it's important to know that context. So what we've been doing within the service is we've now got a more thorough quality assurance framework, which is regularly looking at assessments. So we're doing the plans just to check quality. So we're doing it around 8 a month in that respect, but also prior to the plans going out, just putting in simple processes and making sure that it's read and signed and proofread before it goes out as a draft, before it goes to parents, is now in place to improve the quality. So we have seen some slight improvement in the last month in the quality, but it's an ongoing piece of work, which is not just about focusing in on my SEN team, but focusing in on our partners and supporting them in the quality of their reports. So as you say, having woolly statements like you need speech and language support is not what an EHCP should have. It should be more specific, as you said correctly.
Can I just ask how we're going to get that feedback that it's been effective in terms of the parents' perspective on this? I guess we're looking at the parents' perspective on everything, but that's one particular issue that I've picked up a lot of negativity, because that is part of starting the whole process off, really, isn't it, in terms of the Send service. So I don't want to go off into Send. It was just, you know, on that particular item, how we're going to ensure that it's satisfying the parent carers' needs.
So we obviously link with parent carers together at parent forum, local parent forum, to talk about these issues. We're looking at potentially doing some kind of annual survey in the autumn to look at to get feedback from parents. There is ongoing feedback sought from parents when during the process. I wouldn't say I've got that completely tied down as to the process, and would agree that it needs to be looked in too.
Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And Anthony, you've raised your hand. I imagine you want to continue with this.
Just one final point on it, Chair. There is a report coming to the Improvement Board I chair, just for information, but it is the Quality Assurance Framework for EHCPs. And it's really very good. It's asking questions of parents. There's a parallel process to make sure the child's voice is there. So I've been impressed by the shift, and I'm sure that report could be made available as long as it doesn't contain confidential information, because it would show the committee a more mature auditing framework than we've been used to.
I'd like to see that, if that's okay with you, Chairman.
I would just say I would agree with you, Beverley. I think that'd be a really good idea. I'm going to talk slightly later on this meeting about sharing reports rather than necessary things coming to committee, so we can read them in our own time and don't spend so much time talking about them at committee, but just understanding them. So I think that could be very useful if that is possible. Beverley, I'm going to go to Sandra now because her hand is up, and then I may well come back to you again in a minute. Sandra.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I didn't want to ask another question, but I did want to make a comment, if that's okay. I've looked at the stats, and I'm really pleased to note that there's a downward trend in permanent and fixed term exclusions. I know that in the past they've gone through the roof, and that's clearly stopped. And I know that you've put in a team around the school, and it is clearly working. So thank you for that, and well done. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor.
Right, thank you. I mean, I was just going to mention, because we've talked about the MASH on a number of occasions. I think it's one of those things, because I've got down here, we're supposed to be having a visit to the MASH at some point, a few of us, but every time we talk about it, something gets in the way, doesn't it? And over the last year, it's been COVID. So I just wanted to highlight it was still on my mind, but quite understand that it's not going to happen for a certain amount of time. Beverley, did you have any other questions?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, I did have one more just around the reconfiguring the programmes, really. The early help reconfigure with a smaller number of high impact programmes. I'd just like to hear a little bit more about that. I'm assuming that sort of wider, deeper, or
It's slightly more complex, if I could use.
Yes, as I said it, I thought, I'm sure it's a lot more complicated than that, but
I will try and simplify what it is that we're trying to do. So obviously the feedback from Ofsted, as a result of that, Anthony undertook a diagnostic with the service and made a series of recommendations around the early help offer and the response to the challenges that we had around substance misuse, domestic violence, mental health, all the things that have been covered earlier in previous conversations. So what we are doing is building on the team around the school, Councillor Moore. We're kind of scaling up. Is the challenge that that we put to the managers that lead that service, alongside what is it that we need to deliver, bespoke or otherwise. And I'll just give you a really lovely example of how you can still do innovation despite the challenges of COVID. And it's heartening, and it is that the parenting programmes have been changed to offer how do you parent and homeschool in COVID. Now, that might seem like a very simple thing to do, but actually it requires an awful lot of agility to be able to change the direction and support families in a different way, because it's a different approach. We're not going to support families with how do you parent day to day. It is about how do you when you're at your wit's end, like many parents are with the homeschooling, how do you respond to that? So it's taking an aspect of parenting and focusing on it. So it's just one example of when the word targeted is used. What do we need to respond to have impact, and actually if we can just make life a little bit easier for those families, then obviously, everybody has a sense of relief, and it's calmer. So I just put that in, Councillor Dunlop, because it is literally this week's achievement for the service, and I that was not me, that was the service. I take no credit for that. I just offer an opportunity for them to go away and think about how they might want to do business differently, and that's what has come back. So I'll stop at that point in case Anthony's got anything else to say, but I hope that's answered that part of the question, Councillor Dunlop.
I think you've said it all, Elaine.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, I think most of my questions have been answered, but very asked by lots of other people as well, which I'm very pleased about. It's nice to see that people are picking up the same things that I've been seeing. I just have one question about the casework grading improvement. It says that casework grading should improve. Could you give me a quick explanation of how the casework grading system and range, how it works?
For the sake of variance, I'll invite Anthony to answer that, just a different person answering.
Well, BCP is using the Ofsted grades: inadequate, requires improvement, good, or outstanding. And the important measures are to reduce the amount of inadequate work and to increase the amount of work that either requires improvement or is good or is outstanding. And there's certainly been an upward movement in the last few months, which again is welcome. Not enough cases to be a statistically valid sample, but an initial indication of upward moves in the grades.
Okay, thank you. That makes it a lot more understandable. Thank you very much. Jane, have you just raised? Yes, you have. You just raised your hand.
I have, Chair. Yes, I have got a question this time. It's about point 14 to do with school-related improvements, and it's about the reduced exclusions, which I absolutely agree with you needs to be addressed because there are far too many. But I was just wondering, it's such a very difficult subject to tackle, and I wondered what your ideas and aspirations are for trying to actually achieve reduced numbers of exclusions, please, Elaine or Anthony.
So, Councillor Kelly, as you say, the first port of call is to engage with the head teachers in a very honest conversation. The Chief Exec and myself, facilitated by Neil, has regular meetings with the schools, but actually this is more of a strategic conversation, systems leadership conversation around we've got a problem, what are we going to do about it? And there's been encouraging signs with the appetite from head teachers to think more creatively about how we support young people to stay in school. And we do have a schools inclusion team who have had some very successful results over the last few weeks, hence why councillors more seen a drop in the number. I'm still not happy about. I'll take the feedback, Councillor Moore, because it's greatly received. But actually, you know, as far as we're concerned in the service, and I think you're saying exactly the same, it's not good enough. So, you know, we should have zero or very, you know, or exceptions to. But the school inclusion team have been able to maintain a particularly difficult young person in a school environment. And it's been again through innovation rather than just a traditional. So my response, I suppose, Councillor Kelly, is if we know it doesn't work, why are we trying it? And yes, there might be a process, but we know that's not going to work. So we need to be coming into the space in a different way. And that is what officers, parents and teachers are, and the young person themselves, actually, or the children themselves are being asked to do. So I hope that answers your question. So we're not there yet. There's more to do, but the innovation and the commitment from the heads through the systems leadership. And sorry, I should have said that Graham and I, the Chief Executive, have met with the heads on 2 occasions. And I think that it would be an honest reflection to say that the heads have not been used to systems leadership invitation in the way in which we're saying we've got some challenges, we need to sort them. Goes back to what Neil was saying earlier. And you know, the way we're going to solve the catch up is not as a local authority, but as systems leaders. And I am actively talking to our heads around what do we need to do to make this work.
Okay.
Connectivity.
Sorry, connectivity.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I don't think that answers my question yet, but you're obviously, you know, looking at what the answer might be. So that's good news. It's a good start. Yeah.
Can I just follow on the same question, because you've got a target of 0 exclusions. I know it's a slightly leading question, but is that realistic? Do any local authorities achieve that?
I think we have to have a 0 tolerance, and then there can be exceptions. I will tolerate acceptance, but I won't tolerate not having a 0 tolerance.
I think the phrase is the irreducible minimum.
Thank you for that answer. I think we'll make a politician of you yet today. I'm
not sure I could do it justice.
I'm sure you couldn't. Lisa Lewis, I believe you were next.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'm just intrigued about just further down in 14, where it says, with the steps to reduce inequalities, a programme to reduce inequalities receives prominence in the BCP, etc., etc. Can you explain that? How is that going to work, please?
Anthony, would you like to respond to that one?
Well, this action plan becomes consolidated into the BCP Children and Young People's Plan, and it's probably going to be 2021 to 2023, not 24, and that's a statutory requirement at LGR that BCP produces that plan by April. And one of the key issues has obviously worsened, worsened during COVID, is to reduce in terms of attainment and other issues facing children and young people. So this would be a 2-year programme to do as much as possible to bridge those gaps. Obviously that's the national policy, but we need to do more locally. Disproportionately affected groups, children who are being homeschooled without and who are falling further behind. There's any number of examples, and of course it's complex, but the fact that you have put aside the £1 million for a recovery programme, that even though that can't be spent on schools, according to the technical way money can be challenged, it can be channeled, it can be spent on reducing the opportunities gap that so many children have. And so any children and young people's plan has to have that at its centre.
So could I ask, how does it actually work? Or is that too involved for this meeting?
Well, it's not too involved, but we're out to consultation at the moment, I think just for a few more days, to, I think the committee had the plan as well. So we were looking to populate some of the detail after consultation. In fact, I'm having a look at it tomorrow morning to look at what's come back in the consultation, but it will be to try to reduce inequalities over a 2-year period.
Right. And are you feeling quite positive that this can be done?
Well, it's swimming against the tide. So, but the ambition would be to at least go some way to bridging the gaps, because there'd be a chasm at the rate it's going.
Sure. Yeah, really worrying. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any more hands up. So I would thank you both very much. I think we've had a lot of information and a really good discussion there, and I think we've had quite a lot of assurance that things are going definitely in the right direction. Just to sum up, I've got quite a few notes again here. We're talking about we're 4 months in, but we're looking at 2 years required to make these improvements, and hopefully we can do it in that time. We talked about corporate parenting and how we as councillors can improve about staff morale, staffing surveys, and looking at workloads and processes of improving in testing morale by surveys. We had a discussion about Mosaic, which I know we've talked about in this committee on a number of occasions, and workflows. We've had a discussion about the academy and multi-agency partnership, and I think we're quite excited as a group about that. Independent scrutiny and the scale of that. Apprenticeships for children and looking at the council being a family business, which I know I think a number of us are very keen on. Exclusions has come up a couple of times, and how we're going to reduce them, and our very achievable target of no exclusions, and casework grading system, based on the Ofsted criteria, and inequalities and to improve over the next 2-year period. I think that's covered generally everything we discussed. In that case, it's on to item 8, which is Winchelsea satellite of Somerford Primary School site. So this report, I believe, is going to Cabinet on the 10th of February and be presented, I'm sure, by Nicola. We need to decide if we support this and if there's any recommendations that we'd like to be included. And I believe, Neil, you are presenting this one to start with.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The committee will be aware of the pressures that we've been facing in relation to the high needs budget, the budget that funds the additional the support for additional needs with pupils with EHCPs or attending special schools or independent non-maintained special schools. And that budget nationally has been under pressure and locally as well over a period of time, leading us to overspend. One of the reasons for that is around the availability of placements locally for children with particular sets of needs. BCP is fortunate to have a number of special schools, all of which are good or outstanding and sought after, but are also full and oversubscribed. And so we've been through a process of creating additional places, and the committee will be aware of other units that we've created alongside mainstream schools and within special schools, and as standalone units to create additional capacity within the local area. This is the next stage of that. Both schools we're talking about are maintained schools, so they're local authority schools. Somerford Primary School in Christchurch and Winchelsea Special School, which is currently based in Poole. The proposal in front of you is that Somerford Primary has already agreed to reduce its intake number from 60 to 30, and that reflects local demand and parental choice within the area. And in looking at how best to reutilise the whole of the site, a proposal has come forward to create a satellite of the Winchelsea Special School on the Somerford site. So basically take some of the accommodation at Somerford and create a satellite. This will enable us to place more children locally and meet their needs within the maintained sector at a more reasonable cost than if we had to go outside of that because of the capacity issues locally. We undertook a consultation. The consultation responses are in the paper, and you see once again there were a huge number of responses, and generally they were in favour. The area where there were concerns is around an existing small unit, a 2-class unit in Somerford called Woodford, which is a unit from the Linwood Special School, and the parents of Woodford expressed concerns about what would happen to that unit. And unfortunately, at the time of the consultation, we weren't able to answer that question because whilst we committed to re-provide Woodford locally within the Christchurch area, we didn't have a site secured. We do now have a site secured, although I don't think that's in the public domain as yet, so I can't really go into detail. So I think we can provide the parents with the reassurance, and the conversations we've had with them have been positive. So I think the consultation has moved on, and I can give you reassurance that those parents are reassured by what we can offer. And so the paper today is simply saying, does the committee support the establishment of the new satellite at Somerford for Winchelsea, and that will consequently lead to the movement of Woodford to another site within the Christchurch area to continue serving the children of the area. So that's the proposal. It's part of a broader programme of projects, and hopefully the committee will be familiar with the issues that are raised in the paper.
Thank you very much, Neil. Sandra, you've raised your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I think it's probably a matter of public record that I've supported this proposal for a new satellite of Winchelsea on the Somerford school site. I've also contributed to the consultation, and I'm recorded on page 158 under Ward Councillor, and mine is the last entry on the page. But I was a bit upset to read the concerns raised by Linwood School staff and parents. But Neil, you've just addressed that, so hopefully all is resolved now, and know, there's no problems. But I was a bit worried to see it because they clearly didn't know when the consultation went out. And well, hopefully all is well now, and I'm still happy to support it. But I am worried when I see consultation responses like that. Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Does any councillors have any questions regarding this? Beverley, you just beat Jane there. It's on the quick draw.
First, if she wants. I just wanted to come back to that consultation, and I just like, can you give me a little bit more information on why it looks really bad here, but it's not now? I'd like some more detail around when we're saying everyone's happy. How do I know that the parents are now satisfied and the teachers are now satisfied? Because some of these concerns don't make great reading. There's comments like fighting the council over certain things. And when I look at it, my first reaction was, oh my God, why are we doing this? But you're now saying everything's okay. So I'd like a bit more about that, please.
Absolutely, Councillor. And I think the comments that came back through the consultation are actually very positive about the impact that Woodford has had. I think that's the positive way of looking at them, and that parents are very keen not to lose that facility. Now, because of the pace we were working at, there wasn't the clarity at the time of the consultation to give to them beyond we are looking to re-provision the Woodford satellite within the Christchurch area. And that's not a definite commitment, and I can understand why parents felt less than confident about that. We do now have a concrete proposal. However, like I said, I think that's still going through process, and still I can't really talk about what that looks like. And I wouldn't presume to say that parents are happy, because not all of them will be aware of what that's going to look like, because that's still an ongoing process. But what I can say to you is I think we're going to come forward with a really good offer. I think parents, like I say, the informal conversations we've had have been really positive. Linwood are very positive about it, and we'll take that forward. But like I say, due to the pace at which we're trying to do this, because of the pressures around the budget and the needs of the children, these things haven't lined up as neatly as we'd like. We'd have liked to have got the Woodford situation.
My response. Oh, he's frozen. He's frozen on my screen. I don't know if he's still talking.
He's frozen on my screen as well.
I came back. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened there.
You just had a quick kip, I think, or yeah. We'd like to rewind this last minute or so, Neil.
So, well, only to say that, as I said, I couldn't presume to say that parents will be happy, because not everybody is aware of the proposal that's coming forward. But we've worked with Linwood to develop it. Linwood are very happy. Parents are very confident in what Linwood are offering them at Woodford. And I think when we come forward with and are able to speak more broadly about it, then there will be support for that. So, like as I was saying, it's the timing that's been the difficulty, because of the pace at which we've had to work. So I know that's somewhat unsatisfactory, but that's probably as much as I can say today, I'm afraid.
So this is a two-stage situation, is it? I think what I'm trying to get at, Chairman, is absolutely support the principles of the paper, and I understand that there's been a lot of work to bring us to this point. I guess I'm just a bit concerned that when we come to the next stage and we do this further consultation, look at the reports, that it's not adverse and we're in the situation go, what do we do now then? It's just a flag that we might be encountering, I guess, some other problems a little bit down the line. I don't want to appear negative. That's not really where I want to be, but I guess a little flag on that, Chairman.
I know it's very difficult because it does seem somewhat opaque about what I'm trying to say, but my view is that the outcome that we're going to put forward is really positive, and I'm really positive about it, and I hope the parents are as well. Like I said, I'm glad that Linwood are, and I think parents would trust Linwood's view on this, because Woodford has been such a success. You know, it's provided something that wasn't available before. It's only 2 classrooms, not a huge provision, does save us money, but it does meet a very particular set of children's needs very, very well. And we, at no point in this process did we ever want to lose that. It was just about where we were going to position it.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you. I've just had a message slightly early on in the chat bar for Mark Saxby saying that he fully supports this provision. So I'll just read that out because it's not available for the public to see that. Jane, you were beaten by Beverley, but it's your turn now.
Thank you very much, Chairman. It's a similar sort of question that perhaps to help me understand what is going on a bit better, perhaps. Are the children who are going to be at the Winchelsea provision, are they a different cohort of children than are currently at the Linwood provision? Because I don't really understand why we can't just expand the Linwood instead of having to change provider, move those children who are now settled, all that I've read in the consultation report. Please.
Yeah, I understand. So the Woodford provision is a very specific provision, and it serves primary school pupils. And so it wasn't one that was, we didn't need to expand that type of provision beyond what's already being offered. So that was not necessary. Equally, what we really need is additional secondary provision. That's what we really, really need. That's where the costs are. And so by creating a Winchelsea satellite, some of the Winchelsea primary school pupils can move to the new Winchelsea site. And in the existing Winchelsea site, we can create secondary places. So there is a flow of children through this. We did look at, and we very much wanted to actually leave Woodford on the same site and to share, but the capacity simply wasn't there. And so this was the best route to getting 50 or so places for Winchelsea, retaining the places for Woodford, and creating secondary provision by the movements across the piece. And as you'll be aware, the special schools and their satellites serve the whole area. Yeah. So where they're positioned in the borough is less important because children often travel in one way or another anyway from across the whole area. And we've done a travel assessment and those sorts of things, as you would expect. So there is a whole order of changes that go into this to create the outcome that we need that has the biggest impact on the budget whilst providing the very best services for children and their families. And like I said, I think the outcome for Woodford is actually going to be really, really positive.
That's really comforting. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Lisa Lewis, you had your hand up, but you've lowered it. Did you still want to speak?
No, thanks, Chair. My questions have all been answered. I was very concerned about the 14 Woodford children and what was going to happen to them, and you know, they'd all got used to being there, although of course that was all disrupted this year. But no, it's all been answered. So as long if Neil's very happy with what's happening to them, that's fine. I'll go with that. Thank you.
Okay, so I mean, my feeling is that we all very much support this new provision, but we had concerns about the children at the Woodford satellite. We've had some reassurances from Neil that this is being managed and we have a solution. Nicola, you just raised your hand. Do you want to come into this before I sort of finish my summary, because we have got to just decide that we're happy to support this before we move on. So Nicola, would you?
I can do it before or after you sum up, Chair.
Okay, in that case, I'll try to finish the summing up. So basically, we just need to agree that we support this and sort of. So do we? Is the question? Do we trust Neil in this sort of? He's assured us that there is something in place, which unfortunately he can't share at this moment in time. So it's basically, as a committee, do we trust Neil? I think is our question. Do we support this? Does anybody not support it? No, okay, I'm quite happy with that, but I do feel that taking to cabinet, we did ought to say that we did discuss long and hard about the problems of the children at Woodford School satellite, and that we get the reassurances that is being dealt with. Nicola.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks to your panel for considering this and the wide-ranging discussion around it. And I just wanted to add an undertaking to report that in Cabinet as fully and as fairly as I can in asking Cabinet to make the decision. And clearly there are 2 weeks between now and then, so any update that I'm able to give regarding that Linwood provision, I will clearly do in public if I'm able to, and certainly perhaps Mr Goddard and I could undertake one way or another to keep your panel informed in any case afterwards about what that provision does in fact look like.
Thank you. I think we'll be very happy because yeah, just to get our assurances. In that case, I think we're happy to support that, and we can move on to the next agenda item. At this time, we've been here for 2 hours now, but we're getting quite close to the end of the agenda. I'm just going to ask. I was intending to persevere through, unless anybody is feeling to talk about coming up. So if anybody has in their mind that they want to speak at length on anything that's coming up, if you could just let me know now, because if that's the case, we'll have a 10-minute break. If not, we'll just push through to the last couple of agenda items. Now, in that case, we've got agenda item 9, items for information. I alluded to this earlier on. We've got a couple of items: the care sufficiency, an update on the impact of the family support strategy. In my attempt to try to thin out the agenda so we can focus on the things that we need to focus on at the moment, I decided that it would be beneficial to take those out of an agenda item and send them out for information. So those will be coming to you, and we have now another item to add to that. The forward plan, just before I check on that, I've been invited to the ONS board next Monday to talk about the budget, or to be there for the budget related reports, which are going to Cabinet on the 10th of February. We had a working group, and there are some minutes available for that, which I'll make sure that you all get in the meantime. And what I'm asking for, any comments or questions that any members of this committee may have, if you could feed them through to me in advance of that meeting, so that I can put your thoughts and ideas through to the committee, I'll be most grateful, and I will make sure that the minutes go out. So the rest of the forward plan, I've had a couple of conversations with members about my email that I sent out. Any further comments about the forward plan? Sandra, and then yes, Sandra was first. Just beat Eddie.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Chair. I wonder if I could make a suggestion about future meetings. You may not want to consider it now, you may want to consider it outside the meeting, but I thought I'd mention it anyway, because what it was that last week I subbed health overview and scrutiny. And to be honest, I was impressed by the first 2 agenda items, and they're standing items for every meeting. And one was portfolio holders updates, and 2 was the COVID-19 update. And the blurb for that read along the lines: for the committee to receive an update from adult social care, so here would be children's social care, on COVID-19 to enable the committee to monitor the ongoing pandemic and scrutinise the ongoing response to COVID-19. And I wondered whether we might copy this, because it worked really well at health and it gave members the opportunity to ask questions on current situations. And I know, I don't want to minimise this, but I know we have officers from public health, and indeed our own portfolio holder, literally working their socks off to give us the latest information. So we're all up to date with the current situation. But so I do appreciate that everyone's really busy, but I do think it might help to make sure that everyone on the committee keeps up to date and asks questions on things as they're actually arising. It was just a thought. You know, when I first went into health, I thought, what's this? And then after I'd been there and seen it in action, I thought actually this might be quite useful for children's. As I say, just a thought. You can kill me later.
So thank you for that. That idea of children's copying adults is quite a new one, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. This is one of the reasons I had to swallow my pride and actually ask for it.
I suggest what we need to do is we need to have a discussion out of the meeting on that to see whether that is feasible. I'm looking at the picture here of Nicola smiling at me, who hasn't said anything.
She hasn't shot us yet.
No. She may have gone away and not heard that. So I know she's back on the chair. I noticed, Nicola. So
yeah, I'm at all your scrutiny panels anyway. So I'm very much at your disposal, Chairman. So you know,
perhaps you and I could have a conversation about that out of the meeting. Then that would be very useful. Yeah. I saw another hand up, but it's gone. Eddie, I thought it was, if I remember rightly. Did you have something, Eddie, or was it?
Chairman, it appears that Councillor Cooper has left the meeting, so that may be why he'd raised his hand to inform you.
Well, let's assume that is the case. In that case, we just go on to item 11, meeting dates to note, really. Just please note that the next one is an extra meeting. I reminded you all of this last time. The February meeting is an extra one on the calendar, and it's on a Wednesday, not a Tuesday, which I know is going to confuse me tremendously. But just to remind you, otherwise I don't want to be sat there on Wednesday all on my own. In that case, the meeting is closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.